Afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our fourth episode of Afternoon B on this sunny Thursday afternoon. I hope you're all enjoying the weather. Thank you for taking the time out to join us again. We appreciate it on this hot day. You'll probably rather be outside right now, but you're with us, so thanks for that. Great episode lined up today, as always. I'm going to hand over to Charlotte, who's our wonderful host for today, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about what she's got planned for us.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Louis. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you today. Thank you for joining. We're going to be talking about the kindness economy today, and I think we all have our own slight angle on what that is and how that can contribute. But fundamentally, it's about taking the opportunity right now to sort of redefine business, redefine the landscape, and redefine what leadership in business can actually be about. And we're a bunch of optimists and entrepreneurial mindset and innovators that get very excited about potential opportunities. So often out of crisis becomes opportunity. And we all have a passion rant about this sort of area, really. And I think Mary Portas does sum it up in a very simple language. There's no fancy economic dialogue. It is simply called the kindness economy, which resonates with me because I don't do big words. So when I heard this, it really resonated with my ethos and finding a method or a concept that was out there that really resonated with me, but it was a really professional approach. And that really is about compassion, collaboration, and consideration. And I think, the world would be a better place if we all sort of mapped out to that. There's lots of different ways of talking about it, but we're just going to refer to it as a kindness economy today. But it is about ownership, it's about accountability, it's about being prepared to lead and make mistakes. It's about being prepared to say sorry, putting your hands up when you're wrong. All of those things that make us human. It's about being human with a heart that has compassion for others. That doesn't mean that you're a wafty fairy that, doesn't mean business at all. And I think it's that sort of social cohesion and, looking from things from the inside out to make the world a much better place and people happier. And if people are happy, then there's productivity and there's a whole ripple effect that goes on. And so that's kind of what we're going to sort of discuss today. And just being about human, but you can still be a successful business person, but you can still be a human. So I'm going to throw it out to the team and what they think about, what their view on kindness economy or their angle on it. So I think I'll probably start with Fran, if you'd like to step up.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, I totally agree. I feel like exactly where Mary Portas kind of takes the conversation at the beginning of that TED Talk and also in all of the interviews that she does on this subject is starting with people, but, also figuring in the planet into that as well, which I think for me resonates with my research and areas of expertise on sustainability as well, because everyone always forgets about the fact that the profit aspect is also part of that. Everyone thinks that the idea of sustainability is very fluffy, that the idea of it is very kind of hippie in its nature. And we forget that actually it's a really viable business model, that actually where we're at the moment, which is kind of this consistent growth and everything is just based on, growth for the sake of growth. We've lost the word thrive. And I think that comes from the idea of seeing the balance between those things, seeing the balance between people, profit and planet as well. And from that point of view, I kind of want to bring back in the idea of the economics, because I feel like it does seem like a really scary place to be. And I actually would have been massively put off doing an economics degree or anything. But when you realise actually how much, all of what we teach is fashion business, but all of it comes down to the idea of economics, the idea of how we sort of structure growth within our societies. And, it doesn't have to be that scary. Sometimes all you've got to do is sort of look to the past, which I always like to do, and think about, cultures that previously thrived. And they massively cocoon that idea of balance between growth but also success, and seeing that success isn't about just taking and growing for the sake of it. It's actually about everybody being happy, everybody being able to thrive and prosper within that society. And at the moment, our model of growth is based on a lot of people getting left behind, and also, the impact on our planet as well. So I feel like there's a lot of great opportunity out there with people changing the idea of success and changing the idea of growth and what that means, and turning more to things like thrive and prosper as a marker for business and as a marker for that. And if anyone's looked into kind of Kate Raworth's donut economy, it's very much based on that idea of balance. So the basic idea of it is, as I said, there's a ring essentially that we need to exist within, and what we need to do is get people's lives to exist and prosper to the point of having good healthcare, having good education, being safe, having food, having water, having what we would call basic human needs, which majority of the world actually don't have. Getting them into that donut, which is essentially a ring, but then not going over that, not overstepping the mark and starting to eat into the resources that keep us safe as a planet, and keeping other people on that planet safe as well, and also the other species that exist alongside us. So it's really interesting seeing people taking that up and changing and rewriting things. And there's so many great businesses out there that are just turning everything on its head and realizing that actually, and seeing it in this climate now at the moment with the pandemic, if you can safeguard your people in your business, and if you can get to the point of success where you can survive a rough period because you're not completely living in the most ridiculous margins, or you're not acting in a company that's so reliant on sales or growth or consumerism, then actually you're the ones that are going to survive. It basically makes good business sense if you really think about it like that. But yeah, I covered it from kind of that point of view, that actually it goes beyond what we know right now. Is actually something that's a really old idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but again, I think, and this isn't about, this isn't about, power to women or anything like that, this conversation. It just so happens that, a lot of the women are at the forefront of leading this, I think, because of their personal experiences through, if you listen to the story of Mary Porter's and you listen to Kate's story, it's all of the things are because of their own experiences in those worlds, so, and it is more about the sort of compassionate and human side of it, and being comfortable to say it's okay to be like that and still be successful. There's nothing wrong with success, but success doesn't necessarily equal bottom line profit. And it's so much more than that. And I think, we've got some great examples at the moment. You were saying earlier, Fran, that Amsterdam are going to take on the donut approach, which is, amazing. We've got the New Zealand Prime Minister. I mean, she's smashing it out the park, because she's living, breathing, she's an empathetic leader. She is all about the people, and, she's putting herself on the front line and not scared to fail, but taking ownership, but taking her tribe with her. It's a very, it's a collective, she's very collective in her approach, and it is through the compassion and kindness of human nature that everything that she does is driven for the greater good. So I think there's some really great influential examples of this, and I think Toyin's experience with the sort of smaller scale businesses and them setting up like this is I'm really looking forward to hearing about that as well, Toyin. So what's your feedback?
Yeah, I quite like the whole idea and the concept of kindness economy, because it slows everything down. I think we've kind of been, working in industry and working with businesses for like 14 years. Everybody's been on this treadmill to kind of make money, profits, margins, and as Mary Porter says, we don't see people as consumers, but just kind of like, how can I just get them to buy stuff from me? And I think, in like the last 4 or 5 years, that whole shift into the whole sustainability and the growth of sustainability has created these new models. And, and it's nice to see, because, the up-and-coming brands are taking their time. They're not kind of going, focusing on the bottom line and thinking, I've got to make this much money in the next 2-3 years. But actually, they're kind of going, well, actually, what I want to do is, we want us to grow, but actually we want to kind of, create jobs. We want to create, better working conditions for our employees, pay them a good wage. We want to make sure that we show transparency within our business. And, as part of that, there's a big kind of trend at the moment in terms of businesses wanting to give back as part of their business. So I worked with quite a few small brands who, one of them, they every purchase you buy from them, they donate a number of meals to the homeless and the vulnerable, in a local community. So, I kind of see, the changing trends, and I think even with consumers, I think we're kind of all a bit sick of, just pumped lots of marketing and telling us to buy. And even within ourselves, we're kind of thinking, where are you making our stuff? How are you treating those people? How is it you can make a T-shirt for £2.50? So we're becoming very much more conscious about that, and how and the messages that brands are putting out, which again has seen a kind of a big shift in terms of customers getting a bit sick of the types of marketing that's being pushed out, and actually much more focus on what are your values? What do you stand for as a business? Are you kind? Are you nice? Are you treating your employees well? And actually what we're seeing is a move from the big brands and people much more interacting with the smaller brands, because actually they're kind of showing all of that. Because I think a lot of businesses have kind of gone, oh no, we can't, we have to kind of keep everything concealed and just have this corporate base to our business. Actually, consumers want to know what's behind that business and who's behind that business. And so they're getting that from the small brands, and getting to have that direct communication through social media platforms, but also kind of, being able to contribute to how those brands can make themselves better and, be much, be kinder and more contributing towards the planet and so forth. So yeah, it's the kindness economy is definitely an upward trend, and something that's here to stay. And definitely.
Yeah, I think I suppose if you think about it on your conversation, it's very much people. It's not about being. It's about being genuinely authentic, not authentic for the sake of being authentic. Yeah. And I think that's the layer. I mean, we always know, obviously, the brands are big and people know the values of why we buy into brands. But even that's massively shifted over the last year. It's not about buying into that brand because that logo puts you in a sort of social tribe and subculture. Obviously, there's still that element. But it's also about the ethics and the values that are associated with that. And people are buying more into, that sort of lifestyle of reality. I don't know what the word is. It's not you're buying into the authenticity of the brand, but it's more than just that. You're buying into its DNA and its values, but in a really authentic, much deeper level than just because it's promoting itself. Is you'll feel like this and your image is more like that. It's so much bigger than, like you're saying, Toy, and it's to do with the way they treat their staff, the philosophy of the business, who owns the business. You want to know that kind of stuff. You want to know the people behind it throughout the whole supply chain, but not in a greenwashing way, not in a political way. It is more of that, if I'm putting my money here, I want to know, what actually that's doing. So Tom's is a really basic example, isn't it? It's been going for years. You buy a pair of Tom's shoes and they give a pair, but you're buying into that and you trust that that's what they're doing. There's all the food, like Gusto and or all the others that are fabulous. I can't think of the names. All the others that are doing it, and they give meals out to others as well. You buy a meal like you're saying, and there's all those kind of things. But it's not done in a marketing cheesy way. It's if they're done in a marketing cheesy way, they don't sustain and they fail, isn't it? Because it's when they're trying to do it as a gimmick, it doesn't work. But those ones that actually grew like that,
and they start off and they're born in that way, it's much more authentic, definitely. Because I think those, the bigger brands now are trying to catch on and trying to find their hook in terms of how they can kind of claw back from this kindness economy. But kind of coming back to the kindness economy, and the links, whether it's business or whether it's looking at Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, it all comes back down to how personable people are and how we can kind of feel like they could be our friend, or we've got that connection with them. And I think that's a big part of the kindness economy, is having that connection, whether it's a brand or whether it's a world leader. You can empathise and they're coming down to your level. So they feel like one of you, rather than just having this, as I say, this corporate base that we kind of see on big brands.
Yeah. I think it's exactly what she does. She goes on, Facebook Live for 2 minutes, and it's like, oh, you know,
Ladies
You're a
in the
person.
background.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And she does things like, I won't keep you long because I know it's nearly tea time for your kids. You know, it's all those little things that it's just that sort of appreciation, really, isn't it? Louis, what's your take on all of this?
Yeah, you actually stole my case study there with Tom's. I thought no one had said that. I had some ammo there, but no, I think it's
the gold dust.
yeah, yes. I think it's really interesting with like you said with Tom's. That's been a model. It's clear to see whether it's been a big trend or a smaller trend. The kindness economy has been there, whether it was called that, whether it's a trend as such. There have been elements of it because you're always going to get those innovators and the entrepreneurs who are trying to be different for the right reasons. As you say, it's got to be genuine, not just for the sake of saying we're good at this, look at us. It doesn't have to be a show. I think it's interesting to see, like, especially with New Zealand, okay, you could argue they're not one of the big 8, the big 10, but it's that whole idea of taking a risk on capitalism, okay? It's not so much about the more is better, always. It's nice to see that, in a way, there's similarities between Tom's and New Zealand. I didn't think I'd ever make that similarity approach, but in terms of kind of messing with the status quo, showing that it doesn't matter what level of hierarchy you're at, whether it's top down or you're a more people-friendly company, it can be done, and it doesn't matter what level it's on. And it's clear to see, like we've just been speaking about, that it's been a success. Okay, obviously, it's hard because in the case of Tom's, you'd like to see more brands, which there are nowadays. There are lots of brands and companies that do a similar thing. But when you're still plagued with these fast fashion brands like Boohoo, Forever 21 and stuff, it's so hard to get people out of that cyclical trend of just buying cheap because it's on trend, what they think is on trend, and because they can afford it and it's with them within a few days. So I think that's where it'll be nice to see over, I think, the next 10 or so years to see these new and budding entrepreneurs who have grown up in a millennial Gen Z generation with the values of circular economy and like Fran was touching on, the donut economics, that approach to things of all for one rather than money is the bottom line. There's so much more than that. And I think I saw a really good podcast with Brian Chesky, the Airbnb CEO, and I think they've got a really nice framework in terms of just the people aspect. Obviously, they said like their business is split into so many different sectors because obviously they're renting places out, but also they're taking customers on. And he was talking about during COVID has been so hard for them. He said it's tough because they've had to decide between whether they side with their lodgers or the people renting it out. Whose side do they take in terms of, because they're both losing money or an experience at the end of the day. And he said we went with the people who are renting their spaces out because it's likely they're renting because they need the money to survive and pay bills, feed their children. But he said again that was a big decision they took as a company. I think he said they lost nearly 2 billion in listings just during COVID. But again, it's that idea of the profit doesn't matter when you're doing the right thing on a personal, like Mary Porter said, the triple bottom line: people, planet, profit, in that order. When you're showing to put them values first, and that people are before profit, it does make you want to buy into it, and it does show you that you're valued. And like you say, it comes back to this thing of DNA and buying more than just the product, but buying into the brand and being proud to say, yeah, I do buy from that brand, or yeah, I shop with them, or yeah, I've stayed at one of their places, because it's that idea of, you know, they're doing the right thing and you share those same common interests. So I think a lot of business models like that will go far for sure, especially with the younger generations. It'll be massive.
I think kind of linking into that as well, what you're saying is one of the big challenges at the moment is that it has to be an active choice for the person who's going to vote with their money and decide to, you know, not buy the £1 bikini by Misguided that's, you know, being shown to you in the adverts of Love Island or whatever. You know, it's choosing to exist outside the machine. But it's really interesting when you're sort of saying that scale up, scale down thing against Tom's to Jacinda Ardern and how they're the same thing but on different scales. And that goes with putting people first in all instances. So if you are a world leader, that goes into that as well, because if you can up the well-being of your people, up the education of your people, then actually that choice between the good company and the bad company, maybe paying double, triple on a product, becomes easier because you're giving people the ability to earn. Maybe you're giving a standard income because, some of the things that happen, and that's why, female prime ministers, for example, do tap into that, is because quite often it's mothers that, lose out in terms of economics. So there's so much that you can do at a government level to boost things at the smaller scale, to make people buy the Toms instead of the cheap £2, £3 knockoffs on the high street. And it's all part of the same system. And so much of our consumerism, which is at the heart of all of this conversation, is because of our own well-being. It is because of the way that we see our lives, and we see stuff being so important to how we feel. And so the kindness economy itself is not just about what's out there on sale or what we buy into. It's how we feel when we buy it, and it's how we feel when we use it, and it's how we feel about the people that make it. And it's such a connected idea that it just absolutely wipes the idea of just basic growth out of the water, because actually it comes into contact with everything. And exactly like you say, Lou, it's that idea of just a stronger business. It's something that's, in terms of what you'd want to invest in, and then that's pretty much where everything goes now. Thinking about kind of large-scale investments, it was always this idea of they wanted to see this mindless growth before they invested. And that is such a massive turn-off for investors now. What they want to see is something that's massively strong and stable. And the companies that are investing at the moment are all long-term. They're not the ones that are going to line their pockets short-term, because they've realised that is huge risk. So I think that's so interesting, seeing that idea of scale up and scale down. But actually the kind of connected aspect is the people, it's the feelings, it's the emotions.
Exactly. Exactly. It comes down to that, doesn't it, Pete? I think, as you say, talking on a government level, it's that knock-on effect. So I know, I'm not sure exactly which countries, but I think maybe like Iceland, Norway and stuff, it's this idea of testing like a 4-day working week, supporting mothers with children to higher ages, starting at school, having shorter days. And you think, when you come from a country or countries based on the capital idea of you work 5 days a week, you make your money, you send your kids to school. When you look at these new ways of experimenting, you see that these countries doing the 4-day working week, kids having shorter days or not having homework, that satisfaction is up in terms of living, their education pass rate is higher, their overall health is better. And there's that thing of, okay, well, this model's worked for 50 to 100 years, that's fine, but there's a new way of living now, and that's starting to take, and it's clear to see, it's not, like you say earlier, it's not a gimmick. We're not buying into this thing of, as you say, Fran, with investors, it's nothing short term, no one's lining pockets here as such. It's the long term vision for the future, and it's clearly taken off.
The bare bum economy, as Kate Raworth says. I think keep bringing up that idea of the gender issues, but I think it's one of the most clearest ways of seeing it nowadays, because everyone likes to think that, gender issues don't exist, or racism doesn't exist, but all of these things exist. It's systematic in the way that our economy is so growth first, and everything's based on GDP. So we can't take into account what's right and what's wrong, because that always comes second to what we make or what we earn. And it's this constant idea that there's only so much to go around, and that's where all of this problems with where we're at, with gender and everything else to do with diversity, and it's because GDP doesn't take into account so much of what goes on in communities and in livelihoods. And the idea of I think the whole idea of the growth structure that we see now, and the idea of GDP, I think that came from the idea of from the 1930s. But it's got to its peak. It can't continue. You can't continue growth like that. What goes up must come down. It's a classic, and we're seeing that with the impact on the environment and the impact on our societies. I don't think it's natural for us as human beings that we are the sole carer of children. There's women that are locked in their houses basically because it used to be that communities used to look after children, But as soon as, it's the requirement that all the household goes to work, or, nobody knows their neighbour anymore because we just don't have time, because we've all subscribed to this idea of the 5-day week, like you say, that we subscribe to the idea of, okay, we're going to literally live with, within maybe not even the boundaries of our paychecks. Maybe we all live within credit because we have to have stuff. We have to have the next thing. And that just means that we're all on this wheel where we feel like we can't get off. I think what's interesting is seeing that wheel kind of crack a bit, and maybe at the moment with, I know Mary Portas was definitely saying that in an FT webinar that I saw her in, was that some companies are just not going to be able to survive this, and that's probably okay. And so there's this idea that maybe an aspect of the kindness economy is like disaster as well. There's going to be some things that aren't so, fluffy and woolly and nice to talk about. There's going to be a horrible transition for some businesses and the people that have been essentially enslaved into them. They've not been part of that business. They've just earned their paycheck out of it. They've not been part of the vision. They've just been part of it. So I feel like that's something as well that would need to be taken into account as we move into this, that there are going to be, personal disasters from it as well.
Yeah, but I think that's also true historically when you look back at any major recession or any major sort of, point like this after war, recession and crisis point, there comes change, and that's the bit that excites me, but also terrifies me, that we don't snap back into what is considered normal. Do you know what I mean? That we actually now find that last push energy to then continue everything, because there are going to be many businesses that were very credit facing or too fast and then now couldn't slow down and have just sort of catapulted through this and aren't going to be able to recover. And I think, and that FT thing was really good that we listened to that day, Fran, and it is exactly that. It's not going to be all, happiness and fluffy and, kindness to get to there, but I think we need to sort of whittle out some stuff, and I think the enormity of the potential impact in the long run is going to be much better than doing it in little droves. I mean, we've mentioned a couple of times over this podcast, that we've been accelerated 10 years in the last sort of 3 months, and I think that's what we have to find some acceptance and keep on that sort of, that vision. But it's hard because equally everyone's a bit fatigued. But I think there's some really solid models out there to spin off. And if you listen about the donut, and it's the same principle. She uses very simple language. She breaks down economics very relatable. It's all very relatable. There's no fluffy language. There's no big words to confuse people. And I think that also goes such a long way, that when you start to realise that you can just use normal words and it doesn't, and that makes the whole thing a lot more approachable and, I could actually do that. And it's about empowering as well, isn't it, in the right way, rather than, and I think it goes back to what you're saying, Toyin, it's about not coming down to people's levels at all, but being on the same level and being, empowering people to come up above you and rise beyond you. Do you know what I mean? Because if you empower people with compassion and with empathy, then that sort of that love and that care and that sort of spreads out, and that happiness, and then it comes back to what you were saying, Louis, about happiness and well-being, and then generally the community and the whole sort of ecosystem suddenly feels and looks very different, and then people respond, and it is contagious. If you're happy at work or you're happy at home, then everyone benefits. I'm not saying that we can be happy all the time, because that's just not realistic. But and that would be unhealthy equally. But I think there is that sort of it's a quality, isn't it? It's a quality, and it's having value, and it's feeling like you go to sleep at night with thinking, that was a good day, and there was nothing that sort of felt wrong. And because you kind of get that gut instinct, don't you? But yeah, it's really interesting. I find the language interesting as well. Sort of making it less big and scary, because I think I was thinking back about an example of that, and I remember when I started doing my PG cert and I had to learn how to say pedagogy and pedagogic. I was like, what is that word, you know? And, yeah, exactly, Toy. I was like,
pedagogy or pedagogy?
Oh, I am, no, pedagogy. Pedagogic, yeah.
Pedagogy?
Yeah, exactly. And it basically means, you know, academic subject teaching. That's concept. It's like, you know, I was like, why can't you just say that? Honestly, I had to practice religiously, quietly on my own before I was confident to say that word out loud. And I was trying to think of a word. There's so many in that kind of realm of economics and politics that just, you know, that just don't resonate with me. And I was just laughing. Yeah, I was laughing at myself.
The conspiracist in me believes that the whole reason why they make it so damn hard and so damn threatening to start reading a book on economics is they don't want us to know how the system works. They don't want us to bring in a kindness economy.
Yeah, no, exactly. True.
Yeah. I think it's
I've got a really interesting. I have actually got an interesting stat here, which I kind of read off of one of my students' proposals, which was from WGSN, which kind of says that 74% of people or of millennials are kind of looking more at people over profit, and so there's a massive backlash on brands, you know, in terms of how they're behaving. So they're actually looking at brands now and kind of focusing on, you know, are you valuing your people more than you're trying to kind of generate kind of profit, so to speak. But also, it'd be interesting to kind of see what happens now that we're kind of coming out of lockdown. You know, when we kind of went into lockdown and, you know, all the shops got told to close down, and there was a few brands out there that kind of decided to label themselves as essential stores, you know, and the massive backlash, it was kind of like, shut your shop down, you're you know, some employee safety and stuff like that, and whether or not that trend in terms of all the backlash around those brands that behave badly, and, you know, I'm going to say one name, Wetherspoons, you know, when he turned around and said, I'm just going to just get rid of all my staff, go and get a job in the supermarket and come back when you can, when we open again. You know, lots of people are like, we're never going to go and drink in there again, we're not going to, you know, spend our money there. You know, as the lockdown starts to ease, is that going to continue? Are we going to continue, you know, to kind of keep those stances, or are we just going to kind of go, oh, there's just one at the end of my road, convenience, you know, pop in for one, you know, and it'd be interesting to see how those businesses perform when we come out, you know, and whether or not people still kind of believe in those kind of values.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that is going to be the real testament, isn't it? And I think, you know, there would be a majority that do, and then a large majority that don't, because they haven't got the energy, or they haven't got the backing for them, you know, belief in themselves also to stand, you know, or maybe they've got a job and they feel like they have to sort of align with it. It's really hard, because the other thing is, from your stat, is you're absolutely right about, you know, the Gen Z and millennials, and that goes back to what Louis was saying. They're coming up and they're moving up, and they have those mindsets, but we're still stuck, even at, you know, from my age, you know, the generation of
21.
Sort of, you know, 21, is, you know, there's quite a few, you know, even the top sort of board members are still quite old school, you know, so there is that, you know, it's going to take time, and it's going to take some disruptors, and it's going to take some quite strong people to really, you know, shake it up. You know, she's 39, isn't she, the New Zealand Prime Minister? She's only 39, you know, so she's of that kind of, that generation, and that's why we can all relate to her, and we completely get it. Whereas, you know, above that, I think they like the idea, but no, you know, it's, you know, there's a few of them. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, there is a sort of quite high entrepreneurial innovator in that sector, but they're sort of quite unique, aren't they? And they've kind of got their niches, you know, and they don't come from, they're highly functioning humans. They're not necessarily economics, sort of, you know, business strategists from that sort of side of things, because that's the thing, isn't it? It's implementing models and, you know, sort of, it's kind of coming up with, I think this stems back to why we started the sustainability unit all those years ago, Fran, when we started injecting it. It's because you kind of need to join the strategy, and there's a plan and a method campaign, to implement process, So when Fran and I were breaking down and discussing how do we get, sustainability needs to be embedded within our curriculum. It needs to be it just needs to be a normal conversation. It doesn't need to be a thing, because that's, a few years ago when it was still kind of like, a thing. But it was about how do we get them to understand that there's business models that function like this, that are completely viable for a business to take on, rather than being, like Fran was mentioning earlier, that sort of hippie, hemp-wearing, campaignist activist. It was really because fundamentally no business, bigger business is already functioning a certain way. You have to go through in that sort of manner to a certain extent. You can still go in with kindness, and you can still, kill it with kindness, basically. Absolutely, and compassion and love. I'm all about that. But you still have to get into their mindset, and the only way they're going to understand that is that how's it going to affect, because the question always was, how's it going to affect my bottom line? Why would I buy an organic t-shirt, for instance? Organic cotton to make that t-shirt when I could buy that, and it's, I make 5-10p more per t-shirt. Why would I do that? So it was about always that sort of approach. And I think I think it's getting weaker, but I still think there is that shift, which is why I think those companies over the last sort of 10-15 years that have set themselves up, like Tom's and like Vega and all of those kind of ones that have existed based on that model, which is kind of what the plan was with that unit, wasn't it? It was like basically creating a concept right from the beginning. You set it up, but we're still sort of going through the chain of all the ones that are trying to switch a very old traditional model. So it's like finding the right language and the right approach, that albeit this is great. I think what both the examples we're using today with the donut and with the sort of, kindness economy, there's logistical stats and research and figures and examples of those being successful models. And that's what people need to see to have the confidence to change, if you're not an innovator and a leader that's happy to have a go because you truly believe in it. So that's the other bit that'll be interesting to see. We've got some really great examples, huge examples across. I mean, the footballer, what's his surname, Marcus
Rashford.
Yeah, what a legend. Completely did it. It wasn't about publicity. It was just a complete personal, and there's a couple of other footballers, don't they, that they don't have any sort of, they give quite a lot of their money away, and all for the right reasons. They don't shout about it. People have found out about it, obviously, and it's about that kind of thing. So, and there's so many different really influential examples going on in many different pockets that aren't just economics, that aren't just, Mary Porter's is fundamentally, came from a visual merchandising background, she ended up going to government, and because she had her passion rant, and she did something about it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And she started her own agency and all that kind of stuff. Marcus is a footballer because of his talent, but what he's doing is using his position for the greater good. And it's all of that. It's that, but in a really authentic way, not in a self-marketing way. And I think so. If you actually start looking around, and it goes back to what you were saying, if you start looking around at all the different really great examples across sectors that there are, and the good that it's doing and the impact it's having, it's just we need more.
Yeah.
And it needs to happen. That's the thing, isn't it? It's like we need more, and we need to see the sort of ripple effects, which I think is happening. Yeah. But I just
more of the right thing. I think a big one for me is, I always laugh at Facebook. I think Facebook advertises themselves more so. It's like, friendly environment. Then you have the Cambridge Analytica scandal for one, and then now they're plugging the Facebook portal. Like, oh, see family. Like, is this the same portal that was found to be recording everyone's houses a few months ago? So again, it comes down to that idea of, if you're gonna, you might not be able to, because massive, huge company, and in terms of founding a few years before, in terms of the turn of trends, you might not be able to focus your whole DNA around this idea of kindness and value and people first. But there's other ways to do it. Don't follow the crowd and use your status as a way to, we can justify that because we're a multi-billion-pound corporation. And I like what you said about Rashford, for example, and another one being, I know Raheem Sterling does a lot in terms for kids who have come from impoverished backgrounds and made it through the system. But again, it comes down to that idea of this new wave against the capitalism, because in all the papers, no matter what Sterling's done in the last few years, he's just criticised that he could donate all his wages for a year to charity because he bought a new car for X amount of money and there's people starving on the streets. They put him as this poster boy for the wrong way. And I think and over time we will see that change where they are highlighted for the amazing people they are, being footballers who have such an influence on the younger generation and using their podium to show that, no, we are people, we can do good. But that's just a thing of time. As you say, a lot of companies, you still have these big wigs at the top who are stuck in their ways just because it's their lifestyle and what they've known through their 50 years of business. And that will eventually change, but it just takes time. And I think one thing for me, going back to a subject you just spoke about, was this idea of empowerment. I remember a few years ago, I think Microsoft in Japan done some research where it was like they had 30 staff and they done an experiment where 10 of them were promised a pay rise if they done more work, 10 of them were promised a promotion, and 10 of them were just given good feedback and praised for their work. And it turned out over time that the ones who were praised were the more productive, because after a while they got more money, but eventually they just wanted more because they were getting used to it. The promotion didn't really mean much because they were all getting promoted anyway, so they were never getting above their peers. But when it come down to that, a simple few words, you're doing really well, like keep on this path, you're doing something really good here, gives you that most. And that's the idea of empowerment and people. And the more people start to realise that if you're promoting this empowerment within your company, it's going to raise your productivity, it's going to raise your morale, it's going to raise your confidence. So again, I think, as we've all said, focusing on people, planet, profit in that order is massive over the coming years, for sure.
And also that even playing field. Because if you think about what you're saying about, people stuck in their ways, because even by the time, in 10, 15 years time, when we're of my generation, we're, some of them are already, but between the next sort of 5 and 15 years is when sort of my generation will be sort of massively at the sort of board level across, en masse. But by then, a lot would have happened further down the food chain, if you want to put it like that. So there'll be new stuff to learn. But I think if we can change that sort of model to more that kind of model, where there's obviously still roles of experience. Do you know what I mean? It's not, it's not, but it's about the even playing field. That although yes, I'm the MD and you're the junior. But it's about having a voice and just saying, just because I'm the MD, it doesn't mean that, junior, you don't have an opinion or a voice, because I bet you've got loads to bring to the table. So I think it's about also tilting that balance of allowing your elder self to be taught by, which would have been your younger self, the one that was at the bottom going, I've got fresh eyes, I've got loads of new ideas, I know exactly what's going on in my generation. It's empowering opinion and thought. And just because you're inexperienced doesn't mean that you don't come with great ideas. And so I think a lot of people at the top, I do say it gets lonely, but I think the ones that are really successful are the ones that remember the younger self without all that experience and all of that, that sort of luggage, really. And I think if you can sort of even out the playing field then, because it's like a natural life cycle, isn't it? The people at the bottom are always infuriated with the people at the top because they don't see what. But actually, why does it have to be like that? I think there has to be a level of decision making, but it can be done in a way, and I think the sort of media companies that all the big media companies that boomed over the last sort of 5-10 years, albeit some of them not ethically right or whatever reason, but one of the things that has worked in their models is that ideas and empowering people to get on with it. I think there was some chaos and order, which means they crash and burn, but the ones that sort of find a settlement of decision making, not power, just I think decision making and experience, but enhances the people and the ideas, and allowing those to cultivate and allowing creative expression and not killing those people with processes. I think I think if we could do that now, I think you'd see a difference. If we could get, you know, and I think there are some great grad programs out there, or great companies that already do that, where they invite the interns or, you know, the juniors to you know, they have a mentor of one of the top bods, because you know what, they learn a hell of a lot about the people and the generations, and they also learn from there. So there's that sort of mentor sort of system as well, where so I think if more things like that happen, that works as well.
But even like at the business school, for example, like I graduated 2 years ago now, and then as soon as I stepped in, it was like immediately introduced to, knew Catherine already, but immediately introduced to Simon, like director of the school, and it's like there was never that thing of, obviously there is when you, like anything, like you said, with experience and hierarchy, there's always that thing of that's the big boss or that's my boss, but those people like Simon and Catherine in the business school who talk to you on a personal level, ask you about your day, what you've been up to, and not just what can you bring to the company and have you done this. I think it's interesting what you said. It's like using your experience rather than your hierarchy. Yeah. I think that's what it comes down to, which is a nice way of putting it.
Yeah. And I think that's the kind of mould. If we can start with those small steps, that doesn't break processes, that doesn't break business models, but what it does start to get into the
shift the culture.
Into the sort of it does. Yeah, I think that is. So, but yeah, I think you know, the main thing is whatever we're talking about, it comes back down to the people, doesn't it? But it has to be a two-way people thing, you know. I think it's just I really hope that you know, in this current climate, that is embraced, and people have seen that, because it's been about community. Whatever way you look at it, this whole pandemic has been about community. You know, it's been about protecting community. It's been about supporting communities. You know, supporting the key workers. It's been about supporting your local community, your work community, your friend community, you know, whatever way you look at it, from somewhere or another, it was about, you know, it was always at the forefront of thinking about people and community before, and the safety of others. And I think that comes out. It's that less selfish, because I think we just all got very selfish and very, you know, me, what's good for me. Yeah. Because I think it's that whole thing of when you open up a can of worms, you know, like well-being, you know, it kind of goes to one extreme, doesn't it? It's all about me, but actually, as humans, we're not naturally like that. We're much better. We're nicer humans when we're more compassionate and we're more considerate and we're more caring. Do you know what I mean?
And less spiky.
Yes.
Yeah. Make more change.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're thinking of others. Yeah, it's like your good gym, isn't it, Toyin? You know.
It's like if someone was to make a cycling helmet for Toyin that managed to fit her hair in. Again, community, thinking of people first.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's still stylish though, yeah?
Obviously, come on.
I have been thinking about it, Toyin. I was wondering whether we could do a 3D one, like 3D design one, and get it 3D printed, but I'm not sure that would work. That was my thought. I thought maybe
because we can maybe explore a bit more.
No, totally. I think we should speak to the 3D technicians, because I wonder whether we could actually 3D print something as a prototype. That was my thought. I have been thinking about it. Any jingles?
Nothing.
Jingles.
No. We've only got your laugh at the moment from the first outtake, Charlotte.
I really want to do. I nearly did it then, but no, I refused. Only my laugh. Oh dear. The irony is Libby actually wants a witch-themed 4th birthday, so you know.
There we are. I'll have to send it. Yeah.
All ready to go.
The cackle's on. I think, has anyone got anything else sort of expand on? I think, you know, I feel like we've covered quite a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Do you know what's really interesting? Is a lot of what's come out of this the people power as well. Like. A lot we're saying is like people using their voice for the good, you know, speaking up, voting with their credit cards and things like this. And actually, once we realise that economics and how scary it is isn't that scary at all, and actually it's just about how we live. And we realise that actually we are empowered. That actually that's just latent. We don't think we're empowered, but we are, because we have choices, and you know. Some people have more than others, and you use your platform if you are you know, if you do have more choices than other people, then you use that to empower other people. And it's just this kind of like ladder approach of pulling people up with you. So, you know, I think that's something that's definitely come out of it, is that we can, you know, even if you feel like you're small, there's someone that can pull you up by making a good choice as well. So, rah.
no, completely. I was just thinking of the business school. I'm just thinking, that, you know, that's kind of our ethos, isn't it? And how we are with the students, and how we build that community, and, you know, and that is that culture. And I think that comes down to all those things we've been speaking about, you know. And it is about, I think if you actually take a step back, everything we've spoken about, and it's kind of become full circle, is kind of, you know, one of our sort of USPs, I guess, about the business school as well, isn't it? It's because we are like that. We are, all of us have that value, and that's kind of what we teach, and even intrinsically without even thinking about it. And that's the sort of vibe that's there, the community that's there. And it is about empowering the students to have a voice, you know, but professional voice. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? It's always, you know, it's about finding your professional, personal self. And I think that's a hard thing to find the balance with. And I think one of the things that, again, when I was speaking about this and thinking about this today, was how are you seen, especially as a woman, and I'm, you know, is that you don't necessarily always get the option of having a voice, because you should just be dumbed down, and that's quite a hard voice to find without having an emotional attachment to it, and finding that voice that is your professional self but is still authentically you, because I can't be anything apart from myself. I can't put a persona on of, I have sort of different personas. I have my mum persona, I have, you know, my friend persona, and I have, you know, my sort of teaching, but fundamentally I'm Charlotte, and that's it, really. And I think at some point I thought that you were supposed to have a completely different approach to business, because you should speak in a certain way, or you should be a certain thing to flourish and grow, because that's kind of, you know, the generation that I grew up in, that's kind of what happened. So I think it's really important that those sort of things get pushed aside as well, and that you can be authentically yourself. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you can't be successful. It doesn't mean you have to speak in a certain, you know, it's all of those kind of things that I think we have definitely shifted forward on in the last 5-10 years. I feel that's been quite a big shift, that people are, you know, you don't have to wear a suit to be at the top, you know, all of those stereotypes. It's true though, isn't it? If you actually think about it, you know, it used to have.
Unless you're wearing it ironically.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I am today. Yes, only because I've got some spaghetti strap on, and I didn't want to put anyone through my arms. But it is quite hot. Yeah, it's not a power suit though. It's just a cash rolled up one. But you know what I mean? I think it's really interesting that sort of shift has changed, definitely. You know, there was always, you know, what's your work wardrobe, and what's your, you know, and that kind of thing has shifted, and people don't, I think people still do, don't get me wrong, but I think less people are judging, you know, just because you look a certain way, or you sound a certain way, or you speak a certain way, or you walk a certain way. All of those kind of things, I think, I feel shifted quite a lot. And I think that's quite exciting, because I think that then opens up another sort of more about the people again, doesn't it? It's like, you know, it's not any one type of person that should succeed. You know, why? I think we've had a lot of movers and shakers in the last 5-10 years that have really, you know, pushed that sort of aside, and I think that's been really exciting. I think
as well as we're flooding the industry with radical graduates, and literally what I said at the end of that sustainability unit was like, okay, you might not be able to use this information or act on it for 10 years, but you're there and you're ready and you're poised. So that's the thing out there at the moment, is their business is going to be absolutely overrun with people with fantastic insights and really interesting ways of thinking, because we're churning them out like that. So like or not business, we're coming for you in. So that's going to happen just naturally anyway.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, exciting, yeah. Oh, has anyone else got anything else they'd like to?
Don't think so. I think we've empowered ourselves pretty well there. I like the way you got in professional, personal, Charlotte. Your phrase.
Oh yeah,
I heard
that.
Yeah.
When was it the other way? Yeah.
Or was
that
it?
was
Yeah,
my
I can't
new
remember.
thing, yeah.
I knew you'd plug it.
I've been starting. Yeah, I've just been starting my sort of big research, and I've been. It's basically the models are actually from doing this and last week's and one of the other ones that I'm doing has actually been the basis model of all of this, and then thinking about Gemma when she does her the wellbeing program we've developed for the business school, and how that's evolving, and that's more about. It's about your well-being in terms of your mental and your physical well-being, but also in your professional, personal self. And it is about that because it's about being yourself, but also about your emotional resilience and your articulation and knowing your own sort of strengths and and your leadership and being empathetic as a leader. All of those things that program is evolving more and more into to support the leaders that that I think people like that come to the business school are those kind of people. That's the sort of DNA of a lot of our students. So that's been really exciting. So this has been right up my street, obviously, because that's why I decided to host today. But also in terms of going forward. But yes, thanks, Louis. Thank you for coining my little phrase. So I believe you're up next week. I believe you're hosting next week, Louis.
It is me. Yeah, next week might be. I think it'll be a little bit different. I think people have heard from us as tutors and staff. So I think I'm going to have some students on, some grads on, some alumni. Got some great people who have started their own little businesses over the COVID situation. People who are working. People who are still students. Pretty much probably just talking about uni life, to be honest, what they've been up to, how it's prepared them, what they're doing at the moment, what their plans are, that kind of thing. So bringing that student element. I thought it's hard for us to do an Instagram live with 4 of us, so I thought because we can't get comments as much, I kind of bring some students and some grads on and get them to voice their opinions and speak for the people who are hopefully watching this in their thousands.
Yeah.
We hope.
Just FYI, these guys are aiming for their blue ticks, so come on.
Yeah,
come on.
We need them. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. We all good?
Thank you, Louis. Go on, Louis. Yeah, I think we're all good today.
Yep. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. I had a great one today. I hope you enjoy it. As always, leave your comments. Let us know what you think. If you want to talk about anything, any links that we've been speaking about, you can easily find them. If not, we can post them on the Instagram as well. As always, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Make the most of the nice weather. I'm sure we'll try to, but I'm not sure how much we'll get of it. But until then, we look forward to seeing you for episode 5 next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Take care.